Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. I love talking to authors because they have the courage to take their thoughts, their stories, and their lessons, put it down in a book, share with the many, ultimately changing their legacy and their destiny in the process. And if you're an entrepreneur out there, I highly recommend you write a book. If you need help, check out dreamstarterspublishing.com. We can help you out with wherever you're at in the process. And if you have a book that's already done, you want to use the book to generate leads for that business of yours, check out bookmarketingcrm.com. So if you're out there and you're looking to grow a business, it's very, very important to do it the right way. And maybe sustainability is a core value of yours, and maybe you want to talk to somebody who has some expertise in building businesses slash buildings in a sustainable manner. So the individual that I'm talking to today, Eric Corey Freed. I'm going to read off a little bit of his bio. Check this out. Eric Corey Freed is an award-winning architect, 11-time author, global speaker, and notorious comedian. And as a trained facilitator, adjunct professor, and sought-out lecturer, Eric has educated more than 250,000 people across all 50 states and 7 countries on issues related to sustainability, high-performance building, and the built environment. His books and videos have been viewed by over 1 million people worldwide. And it just keeps going on and on. And I think I could spend 20, 30 minutes reading off his bio. But Eric is the author of 11 books, including Green Building and Remodeling for Dummies, a bestseller with over 200,000 copies in print, and Sustainable School Architecture. His how-to book, Green Sense for Your Home, won the 2011 Outstanding Book Award from the American Society of Journalists and Authors. I need to take a little breather. It's a pretty wild bio, man. So it's an honor to have him with us, and I can't thank him enough for coming on the show and talking about his book, which we're going to go over here in a second. The one that we're going to refer to more than anything else, let's pull it up. Circular Economy. Okay, Circular Economy for Dummies. So let's get right into it. Thanks so much for being here, Eric Corey Freed.
Gosh, thank you for having me. Especially, I feel like the interview's over now because you spent so much time talking about my.
Did we just get through it? I think that's all we need to
I just
say. Am
missed
I
it all.
right?
Yeah.
But we were talking before about how rare it is for an architect to become a comedian and having maybe even a personality. Is that right? That's pretty rare.
Well, yeah, what I like to remind people is that if you think about it, architecture is the world's second oldest profession, right? And so we have this long, noble tradition going back to the pyramids. And I think a lot of architects take themselves very seriously. And I found that because I was focused on sustainability and alerting people about climate change, that these were already such serious, depressing topics. And so I'd be in front of a room full of people and I would just be talking about the state of the world and their faces would just, whoa, just fall. And so about 25 years ago, I just kind of stopped in the middle of a lecture I was giving and I said, this is depressing, isn't it? And everybody's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, this is not, you don't want to hear this. This isn't. And I just started letting my normal personality out, my normal like weirdo personality. And the audience, first of all, they started laughing. They started perking up. I started telling jokes, the same jokes that I tell my clients. People came up to me afterwards and said, I'm really going to remember that analogy you made, that joke you made about concrete. And now 25 years later, I still get people coming up to me saying, I saw you speak 5 years ago and you said this joke about this. And I realized jokes have a power to them that a normal, boring, depressing statistic does not. So I realized that I could align my own personality and my own weird sense of humor with my work and going around the world telling people about the super depressing news of climate change, but in a fun in a fun way. And otherwise I'd be home rocking in the fetal position. But otherwise, it's like therapy for me.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, you got a similar viewpoint as Jerry Seinfeld, right? You got to make fun of this stuff, right? And that, once again, I think it does make you a master communicator. I think you become great at listening, but also really affecting change and maybe inspiring people, but getting people to listen. And if you don't have fun with it, I mean, what the hell's the point of this? So,
Exactly.
I'm with you. Is it what made you want to sit down and write this book though that we're going to be talking about? You said you have 11 books, a circular economy. What's this one about though?
So, well, it's 12 now theoretically, but the circular economy book. Well, this is, for your audience, this is actually pretty interesting. Uh, I'm always working on the next book. Books are almost like tattoos. Like nobody has just one. You keep getting more and more, right? So I'm always working on the next book, and I'm constantly pitching my agent on a book idea, and she's constantly shooting me down. Uh, no, that's stupid. Nobody wants to read that book. And so the whole thing has been a lesson in what's marketable, what's interesting, what would the audience read. And so I pitched my publisher on, hey, let's go back and update. I've got a vision for updating my old 2008 book. Is there any money that you could do to help me update the book? It's out of date, blah blah blah. And they're like, yeah, no, nobody wants to do that. But do you guys want to write a book about the circular economy? Like it just kind of fell in our lap. And for those people that don't know, the circular economy describes this new way of looking at how we make everything. So most things are made using a linear economy of what we call take, make, waste, right? We extract these materials, we create a lot of damage in the process, we make it into something, and then at some point we throw it away, right? That's the typical take, make, waste model. And the circular economy looks at bending that take, make, waste into harvest, make, and remake over and over and over again. And so they said, we know that this is a hot topic. Do you want to write a book about it? You're the only sustainability guy we know. So the book kind of fell in our lap, and I was already working with our clients on these topics, so it just became a natural hit. But it's a very, it's taking a very technical, dry subject and trying to make it exciting. And the great thing about the dummies books is they give you a lot of freedom to just make it funny and make it interesting and make it memorable. And so that's what we did. And then I partnered with my buddy Kyle, who I initially met when he was a grad student, and then he ended up working with me, and we wrote the book together because writing a book alone is already depressing enough. So you might as well be depressed with a buddy and then write it at the same time.
Well, I think the reason why many entrepreneurs would actually care about this is because I think you say the magic phrase, it helps them save money, right? I think that maybe there are those good-hearted people that say, "Man, I want to save the planet, but if I could grow a business and I could save money and produce a lifestyle that I want, all and then save the planet, that makes a lot more sense. It's a lot easier to sell." So how does this book help people save money? And I think you have the great phrase of you close the resource loop, and maybe it's becoming a little bit more, I don't know, just efficient with everything. So what do you mean by this?
Most things are built in a way that was true 50 years ago, right? Based on a set of assumptions that was true 50 years ago. That's not true today. So, for example, we make a lot of things out of plastic. Plastic is used to be cheap. It's not cheap anymore. It's made from oil. It's still very expensive, and we still have the problem of plastic being very difficult to recycle. So, if you were to look at a company and take a circular economy approach, it would be going back and questioning how are they making whatever their products are that they're making? If they're making it out of plastic, going back and questioning those assumptions. Is there something better, something bio-based? And what we discovered is that when you start doing this with companies and really getting into their entire supply chain, you start finding opportunities not only to make the product better, but also to save money, to reduce the dependency on oil, to kind of free them up to try different things. You're essentially redesigning the entire product or the entire world. That was the beauty of the book. That was the biggest lesson that I had from writing the book was it's not just about recycling, but truly circular economy is about rethinking and reimagining how we design everything from clothing to cars to buildings and everything in between.
Now, somebody like me always thinks that we are becoming more wasteful. Maybe there's a trend that you can pinpoint that says that maybe I'm in the wrong, but I see people who are not holding on to anything anymore. The older generations would be very resourceful. The clothes, whether it's the car, they would keep it for their whole lives. I mean, the house, the same house they live in. It seems very temporary, this lifestyle now, where everything is bought, used, or leased, or rented, and then just disposed of. So are we trending in the right direction or the wrong direction? In my opinion, it's the wrong direction. So what do you see?
I agree with you. I agree with you. It's totally the wrong direction. Fashion, for example, we have a whole chapter in the book just on fashion and clothing and what a giant industry, what we call fast fashion is. They want you to buy new clothes every year. They want clothes to go out of style. It's pre-planned obsolescence because they make a lot of money from it, right? And
Right?
there's not a lot of money in quote unquote used clothing. So it's kind of just been building this disposable lifestyle. But this disposable lifestyle comes at massive cost, right? Trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to show off all the time and trying to, every year you get a new car, every year you get a new iPhone, every year you get a whole new wardrobe. That is insane. Not even mentioning the environmental impacts of all that, but just trying to like, what are you doing that for? And who's it for? And so part of it is really kind of rethinking what we buy, why we buy it, and making things that are higher quality that you know are going to last longer and you'll get more use out of it. And that's kind of a great takeaway from this is, like I'm not wearing one now, but I'm obsessed with sport jackets, right? I wear them all the time, even when it's hot out and everybody makes fun of me, and that's fine. But like I'd rather invest money in a good sports jacket that'll last me 20 years, than like something that I'll just buy and it'll fall apart and I throw it away in a year, right? That's not valuable to me. And luckily I'm old enough now that I don't know, you're younger than me, but when you hit your 50s, you start thinking, oh, this is the last sport jacket I'll ever need to buy because I'll be dead soon. Like you just
Oh
start
man.
doing, you just start these. I like these sneakers. I'll buy three because those will be the last three sneakers I'll never need to buy again, right? It's kind of there's a beauty and a piece to it, I think, of being this old, and so it kind of makes you rethink everything that you purchase and purchasing things of value that would last a long time.
Well, for the average entrepreneur, I think they think of survival first, right? They're just trying to build a business and they're not thinking about conservation or, EMFs or anything that is putting out into the environment that is hurtful, right? They're just thinking about survival. And maybe that's how all humans are. But when it comes to a small business, how can they adopt this circular economy approach? And my thought is, well, you need to get off the grid to some degree, right? You want to have solar power. You need to have your own water or filter your own water or do something where you become more self-sustainable, not just sustainable. What is the outline that you can present to somebody listening to this podcast?
I don't even think it needs to be that complicated. There's really two parts to it, right? If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business, you of course can do this for your own business, but also you can provide this as a service to other companies, right? Either through consulting or through supply chain management or something else. You're essentially solving a problem. So I'll give you a quick story. I spoke at a roofing conference. This is how well my career is going. I speak at like 100 conferences a year, and I was speaking at the Single Ply Roofing Association conference, which is actually a pretty fun conference. Uh, but it's a conference that I imagine most people have never heard of before. And we're in the big ballroom, and they're serving the rubber chicken, and I'm doing my speech and telling jokes about climate change, and everybody's laughing. And then afterwards, I sit down and I'm talking to some folks, and I said, "What's your biggest problem right now? What's your biggest challenge?" And he's like, "Oh, you wouldn't understand." I said, "Well, try me." And he said, "Well, we make our product um, from chemicals, and those chemicals are oil based. And the cost of oil, every time it changes the cost of our product. And it's really driving me crazy." And he said, I said, "So what do you do about it?" And he said, "Well, what we normally do is we lock in a price at the beginning of a year. And I try to lock in the price low, but if the price of oil plummets, that means that I've locked in at a higher price than I need to. And if the price of oil goes up, then that's good because that means I've locked in at a lower price. But either way, it's stressful and unpredictable, and it's like a roller coaster, and it's driving me crazy." And I said, "Well, why are you still using oil?" And he said, "What do you mean? That's what we've been using for 50 years. This is, my dad, started the company. It's what we've always been using." And I said, "Well, if oil is so unpredictable, why don't you use something else?" Just simply asking the question of going back and questioning the supply chain. So I'm not a chemist, but I know green chemists, believe it or not. And so I connected them with a network of people, and they switched their chemistry from an oil-based chemical to a soy-based chemical. Well, it turns out that not only was it cheaper, but it was much more stable in terms of price. Plus, he was helping the American soy farmer, which he really liked. Um, and it repositioned his entire company over
Wow.
time. They became a green company overnight. And it really just started with me asking a very childlike question of, well, what are you still doing that for? and starting the conversation. And for most people, especially for entrepreneurs, I think they have they're myopic. They're so close to their business. They internalize it, they take it so personally, they get so stressed about it. It's very hard for them to step back and just say, well, what if we use something else? What if the biggest source of my stress I could get rid of and find something better?
Wow, it's just another way to solve the problem, and you're taking an outsider's perspective, right? Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you just do this? And just like for the first time, maybe you're asking yourself other questions, and the answers are only as good as the questions that you ask yourself or have someone else ask you. And this did set people, I guess you could say, in a different direction, which most likely, if it becomes a better solution and it saves them money and it allows them to sleep better, it's a win-win-win. It's
Exactly.
awesome.
And by the way, that really kind of speaks to the value of just bringing in outsiders, having an advisory board, so to speak, whatever form that takes in your company of, like in addition to being an architect, I also, a buddy of mine published study guides for young architects. We've been doing this for 15 years. It's a side business that we do for fun, and it's helped tens of thousands of people get their architectural license. Um, but at the same time, because we're so close to it, it's very hard for us to step back and look. So I have a network of trusted friends, and if I'm going through like a business problem, I will often just kind of like, hey, can I pick your brain for something? And getting that outsider perspective is invaluable, right? Just getting someone to come in and say, dude, why aren't you offering it this way? Oh my God, I didn't even see it. So I'm as guilty of it as anybody, but having this outside advisory group or trusted advisors or trusted friends or mastermind or whatever you want to call it, and this is probably a common theme that comes up with your other guests too, of just soliciting this input and being open to change.
Hmm. And so I love that idea. I love that example that you just gave. How did you even end up on stages at these, did you say single ply roofing events? I
Yeah,
mean, it's
sexy.
unbelievable. So like you said, I had no clue that there was even events for that. But how did you end up there? Was it because you did start to give people awareness of climate change? Now, before you answer that, I'm one of those guys that says, "Hey, we're on this rock that they say we're going around 66,000 miles per hour. We might be getting a little closer to the sun. We might be going away. If I run the lawnmower, will it affect the world? I don't really see that when it comes to the carbon in the air. The average, what do they say? The percentage of the environment that is made of carbon is 0.03. Well, what's the accurate number that it should be? No climate change scientist has ever been able to tell me what the accurate number is. So I look at this and I say, "Oh my God, it's I believe in the environment. I love being in the nature and woods, but how much control do we really have when you really break it down?" So can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen, what you say on that stage that maybe shocks people into action?
Well, part of me is thinking maybe nothing, right? 30, 30
Yeah.
years of 30 years of doing this, and we're still in the exact same spot I didn't want to be. So, like my current bit right now is I open with it just real big letters that we failed, right? I've been an environmentalist my entire life. I've been doing this 33 years as an architect, and we failed. I don't have any other word for it. We ended up in the exact spot we did not want to be. Decades of warnings from every climate scientist in the world telling us there's a threshold here where we're at risk, like we should not cross it, and then we just crossed it. And then the evidence that I use on stage is I show them uh, a newspaper headline from June 1988, which by the way is when I graduated high school, to give you a sense, do the math. But essentially the headline was covering the fact that Jim Hansen, chief climatologist at NASA, had testified in front of Congress that that climate change was becoming a problem. And if we didn't do something about it right away, in the next 30 years, we'd really start to feel the effects of it. And then I juxtaposed that from June 1988 with a paper 30 years later, same paper, but new headline. And the headline basically says climate change comes for all the wealthy nations. Mr. Hansen was right, right? Exactly as he predicted. So we failed. That's the problem. And despite the decades of warnings, despite the fact that we've known about this for a long time, despite the fact that we've had the solution in our hands for decades, right? We got to stop burning hydrocarbons. Nobody wants to hear that because our entire way of life is driven around disposable products in disposable fashion and driving everywhere. And it's very convenient and it's very comfortable. And believe me, it's really nice to sit at home in full air conditioning and order a pizza and have it delivered. Like I get it, all that. And a lot of the modern environmental movement has been trying to say you should feel guilty, you should feel bad about your lifestyle, you're to blame. And I don't believe any of that. I mean, to
Nice.
blame is really, a handful of fossil fuel companies that keep profiting off of this lifestyle, that keep sowing information discord. So I get it. I get the whole thing. And so I'm very much a realist like you are about it. But unfortunately, the data is staggering, right? Right now, everyone listening just lived through the 12 hottest months on record. And when I say on record, I mean in 125,000 years of climate data, going back to like ice cores and tree rings and like all the stuff that we have. And it's unprecedented. So it's a problem. So that's what I do from stage. And again, everybody's face falls. And so then I throw in jokes and then their face perks up again. And then I give them the bad news. So it's this constant like roller coaster of little good news, little bad news, little good news, little bad news. Just otherwise they would be so depressed they would walk out of there and just, cry themselves to sleep as I would. So how do you deliver this, the spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, as my grandmother used to say, right? So it's kind of like that. And I started from a very entrepreneurial point of view. Is I was an architect. I was designing, a handful of projects a year, and I was getting impatient. I wanted to scale my impact. I wanted to reach more people. And so in 2000, 2001, I made a conscious decision. I was going to start speaking, writing, teaching, and consulting. I was going to start doing those four things. I didn't know if I would be good at those four things. I didn't know if I would like those four things, but I knew that something in me was like, I needed to reach more people. I needed to have more impact. And I started doing them, and I was terrible at them, and I got better at them. And I kept doing them anyway. Every comedian will tell you the first time they go on stage, they bomb, but there's some sort of broken thing in their brain that tells us, oh, we got to get back up there. Right. And every comedian who bombs is not happy until they go back on stage, and then they kill, right? And they destroy the audience. So it was that kind of same thing. The first time I went up, it was a very dry, boring speech, very unmemorable, I'm sure. But there was something there of like I could like feel the audience. It was like it's a give and take. They're all facing you, they're all looking at you. It's like an instant feedback mechanism, right? And so I knew that I could have this exchange with the audience, and I knew that I could get better at it. And so I did.
Awesome. I mean, this is you're making me think of some Seinfeld episodes, but Art Vandelay was an architect, right? That's what he always wanted to be. George Costanza, he chose the name Art Vandelay. He always wanted to be an architect. And I
Right.
remember him coming into the coffee shop, Monk's, and he's pretending like he's a millionaire, right? And Jerry's trying to mess with him. He's like, "So, which which places have you designed around here?" And he was like, he was listing off places that obviously he didn't design, and it was hilarious. So it made me think of this question I want to ask you, but what have you designed as an architect? What have you worked on? Is it houses? Is it buildings? Is it certain structures that we may know? Anything you can share with us?
Oh yeah. So I guess that's probably a big architects are not famous typically. So unless you're designing, I don't know, the White House or something, I don't know if
Frank Lloyd
anybody would.
Wright's the only one that I can think of.
Yeah, exactly. And but I started doing houses. I liked the intimacy of houses. I there's something in my personality and in my cheekbones that like couples like to confess things to me. So you're like a glorified marriage counselor. So you sit there and listen while they argue, and then you design a house for them. So I did that for for years, and then I eventually just moved into schools, and then bigger projects, and again wanting to have more impact. And now I'm director of sustainability at Canon Design. We're what we call a top 10 architecture firm, and we're helping our clients solve big pernicious problems. So we're helping Mayo Clinic reinvent healthcare of the future. We're helping MD Anderson reinvent cancer care. We're um, helping Memorial Sloan Kettering with a new high-rise cancer tower on the east side of New York that overlooks the East River. Like some of these are, just big, giant projects that'll have huge impact. And then also I'm designing university buildings and, new labs for colleges most people probably never heard of before, and everything in between. And I love it. I love the idea of We're designing something to shape the experience of people. And to me, that was my biggest marketing idea. And it really started back in 2000, 2001 when I wanted to reach more people. I knew that my entire marketing plan centered around, look, I'm going to get myself in front of people. I'm going to be tell them what I'm passionate about. And I know that's going to attract clients. And as a side benefit, it also will repel the clients you don't want. So you go out, you be effusive and exciting and interesting, and hey, this is what I believe in architecture, and I think this is a vision that we have, and it will attract people to you, and it will also repel people by the thousands. They'll just run away from you like, ugh, I don't want that guy. And that's a good thing too, right? You want clients that get you. And when you're an entrepreneur, you don't think that way, I think at first. I think you think, well, I need everything and every client, every customer,
Yep.
right? No, I've
That's a
had,
survival mechanism. I need
yeah,
as
sure.
much energy coming my way as possible. And then you wisen up.
But a bad customer and a bad client will cost you so much more in stress and headache and time. And I learned that doing residential, right? Going with clients that I knew weren't a fit, but I was, hungry or desperate or like I need the work. And I just found there's a certain luxury in saying no and picking what you work on and what you don't work on. And I want to work on the big problems, the big, stinky, awful, issues and problems. And so that's what we get to work on at our firm. And it's fantastic.
Wow.
And but to me, it's a lesson for every entrepreneur. Going out and just saying, this is our vision, this is what we believe, this is how we're changing the world. You want to join us? Great. If you don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out, I guess, right? Just enjoy it, have fun. And um there's a certain power to it. Remember, like attracts like. So if you build up a customer base of projects that you're not proud of or not exactly what you want to do, it's just going to attract more of those customers, good or bad. And so you want to be very selective with who you're doing work for.
It's a great nugget for everybody. Great takeaway, right? Like attracts like. So be very careful where you spend your time and who you're working with, because that person most likely is a magnet for very similar people, right? And you might be bringing in the wrong people. I did that early on. Maybe I was one of those guys that tried to build a business, said, "Hey, I want anybody who wants to write a book." And then as time went on, I realized, man, if I pick the wrong person to work with us or we work with them, it's going to slow down the entire team, and then my team will be frustrated, and everybody's on the wrong foot at all times. And I think that once I wisened up and I became smarter about my target audience, my messaging became a little bit more clear. And it was a little bit more political. There was a stance taken, putting the American flag in the background, sharing my true beliefs. It's almost like the world opened up and gave me exactly what I was looking for, which was more, people in alignment with who I am as a person.
It's funny because when you write a book, especially when you write a bunch, so many friends have come to me and said, I want to write a book too. And tell me what to do. And I'm going to just send them to you from now on. But just get them off my back. But
Talk to Mike. There we go.
yeah,
Beautiful. As
Michael
long as
handled.
they're like you, just so you know.
Well, that's the thing. So I'll ask them, well, what's the vision for the book? Who's the audience? And they'll say something like, everybody. I'm like, no, you can't. Everybody. No, that's you need to focus. Like you need to know who's the really intended audience for this book. Who's the voice behind the book? The more clarity you have around the book, the better. The first book I did, Green Building for Dummies, the editor at Wiley's the publisher. The editor at Wiley was amazing, and she said, "Imagine that you're talking to your mother-in-law."
Oh,
And that was just so perfect because I have a mother-in-law and she's a big personality. She's, Italian, big Italian mother-in-law. She's lovely, if she's listening. But when they said that, I knew like there's a certain level of familiarity because clearly, I'm sleeping with your daughter, but also,
yeah.
but also a certain level of deference and respect because she is, after all, your mother-in-law and she deserves it. And that just became the perfect voice for the book. And so with every book, it's always been who's the audience, what's the voice, and the more clarity you have, the better. And we spend a lot of time doing that. What I tell people is you write the book last. The first thing you do is you map out what is the niche for this book, what's the audience, what's the messaging, like all the work. Then you do the writing. right? And I don't know if that goes against what you're telling people,
No,
but
it's
that's how
very
I see
much
it.
in alignment. I always talk about how are you going to use the book once it's done? Who's your target audience? What would you teach that target audience member? And what we found out, this is crazy, is that most people who read a book are usually writing a book to their former selves, who they were 10 years ago.
Mm,
And so that's your automatic target audience. You have the lessons that you give your former self. You have the stories that you've lived, stories are lesson, target audience, and then how it's going to be used once the book is actually published. Once you have that, then you can start the writing. I'm with you on that.
that's great.
By the way, your dog, I keep seeing it going back and forth. Before we hit the record button, you kept saying your dog was fat. Doesn't look like it's a fat dog. Looks
She's
like it's somewhat in a decent shape. That's my
no, she's okay. She's I call her North American house hippo, but she's a pity staffy, big ball of love, by the way. But she's very, as you can see, very comfortable.
I had a beagle, and like I was telling you before, we would always fat shame our beagle. So he wasn't that much of a he was a load for a while, but then we got him down. So we would still call him a load all the time. But yeah, your dog seems like in good shape. Anyways, when it comes to the architecture, you've been in this business how many years?
33.
33.
I,
So
I
how is
look
it?
good, don't I? I moisturize. I'm trying to keep up.
I
Most
see
people don't.
that.
Most
Yeah,
people think I'm lying. I love that they think I'm lying. They're like, you haven't been in 30. Would you start when you were 10? I'm like, bless you. But
well, that's not humor. It's keeping you young, man.
yeah,
But when it comes to the architecture world, I've always seen these people who are out the big corporations, like they're all about, oh, we need to create beauty and we need to save the planet. And then you look at the buildings that they're building back, especially back in the day, the corporations, they're just like these big rat traps. They're just these boxes with windows, right? And they have
yeah.
cubicles in it. Nothing's beauty. No, nothing's beautiful about it, and there is no beauty being represented. And when I look at certain other countries, they were all about building businesses in their cities and towns that represented beauty. And so maybe it's kind of coming back, or maybe it's all about efficiency. So how has it changed in the 33 years that you've been in this industry?
It's certainly, on the one hand, we kind of still build buildings the same way, right? We've been building buildings the same way for 200 years, if you think about it. Uh, but in the last 3 decades, it's certainly people have understood the value of design and that people want experiences, right? And they shouldn't just be reserved for when you're on vacation and you go to Europe and you look at the Pantheon in Rome or whatever. Like they want these experiences everywhere. So I would say in virtually every vertical market, they've understood the value of design. Take retail stores. They've understood that just having an ugly box mall and a sea of asphalt does not necessarily get people to want to come there. But making a place with gardens and walkability and like a downtown Main Street, the trend in retail design over the last 30 years is to make it like a European market, if you notice. And it
Hmm.
works. People come and hang out there and they realize that there's more than the stores. So they program the crap out of it with events and balloons and hot dogs, right? Same thing in hospitality, understanding that it's not just a box to sleep in for the night, but it needs to be almost a relaxing, soothing experience. And this is now translated into healthcare. The trend in healthcare is to be make the hotel stay, make it like a hotel stay, make the patient room like a hospital room with nice finishes and nice views. Um, and that's all just at the surface. And then the work that we're doing at Canon is we're realizing that if I add daylighting and views to a patient room, it boosts the immune response of the patient. It
Because the
lowers their
sun, because the sun, you
just
need
because of the
light.
natural
Yeah.
light.
Yep.
It lowers their recovery time. It boosts the medication efficacy. If I do it in a classroom, it boosts student performance. Their test scores go up just by adding views of nature and daylighting, right? The most simple thing, obvious thing ever. But the old thinking was let's build the school as cheap as possible, as quick as possible. Let's have it meet the bare minimum in terms of code. And they're realizing that was a mistake. I mean, I went to school like that in the 70s. It looked like a prison.
Yeah.
It had bars on the windows, right? So it's those are not uplifting places to put in our children and expect them to thrive, right? And certainly true in the workplace, like you mentioned, the offices. That old 1980, remember Working Girl, that movie? Like the just
No, I remember
oh my
Tootsie.
God, Tootsie's good. But Working Girl is such a good. You should rent it this weekend. But that sea of cubicles is not very inspiring. You're not going to get people's best, most creative work in that awful kind of environment with the flickering fluorescence above and the drop ceilings. Like
I was thinking
people,
of 9 to 5 also. 9 to 5 and Tootsie. For some reason,
there you
they were
go.
always on TV when I was growing up.
And they both had good theme songs, by the way.
That's
But
true. That
I
is true.
digress. but yeah, people finally understood the value of design, and we're seeing that more and more with our clients. With our university clients, they know that students have a choice of which college campus they go to, and they're picking college campuses by how they feel on the college campus, right? When they go and visit, how do I feel? What are the buildings like? And if you've got old, dingy 1950s buildings, you're not going to attract a lot of students. But if you have like these amazing buildings filled with light and soaring spaces and beautiful materials, the students are like, yeah, me want to go here. Like that's what happens. So design is the ultimate differentiator. And companies like Apple get it, obviously.
Oh
They've been the
yeah, of
pioneers.
course,
But everybody else is slowly starting to realize that this is the way you differentiate yourself is through the power of design.
man. Yeah, and I mean, you probably see certain hypocrites out there since you know the industry really well. I don't know about the EV cars, okay? I might be getting a dirt bike that's an EV bike just because I want to go places where nobody can hear me. So there's that. But
They're very
when it
quiet.
comes to the battery itself, from what I gathered, to actually get rid of the battery or dispose of it or even to build it, it's actually worse in the environment. Am I off on that? I mean, what have you come
Yeah,
across?
I just respectfully you're off, but
All right. So tell me, because did you see how it's created? I mean, I've seen the videos on
yeah.
Instagram and the mining that is required, the slave labor that's required, insane, but also the dependency on China, extremely bad for America if something were to hit the fan. And then also the controllability factor. Governments can control EVs way, 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 way more than combustible engines. So
What do you mean, like remotely, like a remote control
yes.
car?
Correct. Yes. So if I
Well,
wanted to
yeah.
tap into a Tesla, if I could pay one of my top programmers who's a great hacker, I bet we could figure it out. Is the way I look at it. So I think we could do that to EVs and shut them down. And then if you're not a great citizen, if you don't treat the government with the utmost respect, if you don't vote a certain Democrat into the office, you know what? Your social credit score is going to drop. And by the way, you can't turn on your EP card nowadays.
Oh my God, really?
That's what I see.
My complaint is more that um, the way car makers are going is they want to do everything as a subscription. So if you want a radio, it's $5.99 a month, and if you want a
You
satellite
know
radio,
that's
it's
coming. Oh,
7.99.
yes.
Oh, they're already piloting it, right? So that's the part. But yeah, most of what you said about EVs is it's in the popular culture, but none of it's true. So we talk about the ecological debt of everything that we make, right? And so the ecological debt of an EV, an electric vehicle, is mostly in the battery, specifically around mining of lithium for the battery. The drivetrain is the same as very similar to a normal car drivetrain. The ecological debt of the battery is 5 to 7 years. The ecological debt of a traditional car, what we call a fossil fuel internal combustion engine car, is 15 to 17 years. And that car is going to keep emitting. So, like, I drive an electric vehicle. Uh, it's parked in my house that's powered by renewable energy. It costs me $4, worth of electricity to fill it up. Uh, my friend's car costs what, $72 the other day when I was with him, like just to fill it up with gas. So already it's like, ugh. But
And
in
what are
terms
you
of,
driving? What's your car?
I have a BMW i3, which looks like a sneaker.
Got it. Okay.
But by the way, is like a friggin' rocket ship. I love driving this thing. It's it's like immediate takeoff. It's all torque. It is the most fun car to drive. I can like weave in between traffic like Batman. It's fantastic. Kids, if you're listening, don't try that at home. But it's the most fun car I've ever had to drive. It's the cheapest to fill up. It's incredibly quiet. It's incredibly clean. It's so much fun. Just go take a test drive on an EV and you'll be hooked right away. And then the ecological debt is very minimal. And here's the other thing. Whether you like it or not, it's happening. All the major manufacturers have already committed to going full EV because they see that that's the future. Um, so the internal combustion engine is going the way of the dodo. And what's even more interesting is when the first vehicles started appearing, right, in 1915, 1920, there were electric vehicles. In fact, we had this kind of split, kind of this almost VHS Betamax like split between EVs, the internal combustion engine, and then a diesel engine.
Hmm.
And the internal combustion won because at that time, oil was cheap and abundant and plentiful and here in this country. So it made sense to go all in on that technology. But now that's really not that true anymore, right? So, And we didn't, of course, know the longer term effects of the air pollution. So, and another nice statistic is in areas where they drive a lot of EVs, like Santa Monica, for example, where there's a lot of EV drivers, the air quality has improved. Asthma rates have gone down because there's this side benefit of just not having this thing spewing exhaust all the time. So it's a great thing. Now, of course, the next problem is how do we get people to stop friggin' driving everywhere and just start, walking and making walkable cities? That's the next big problem. But
15-minute
one
cities.
thing,
Yeah. I think that's
yeah,
scary too, right? Because now you're creating the Simpsons bubble in an area where, it's more about controllability, in my opinion. So I'm one of those guys that always think there's an agenda behind it, and it's never for the people.
yeah.
But when it
You,
comes
you're
to
like
an
Bill.
elect
You're like Bill Burr. You're always
yeah,
uh,
I like Bill
paranoid
Burr's
about.
take on many things for
Yeah,
sure. But when it comes to an EV, last piece I want to talk about on this is when it comes to an EV car, from what I gathered, all right, if it's very, very heavily focused on electronics and you have a fender bender, and if something, and especially driverless cars, there's so many sensors everywhere, the cost of fixing it, insane. And it's almost like it's always going to be totaled. So uh, keeping a car around, if there are issues, it's going to be not in your best interest financially. So I think maybe you're right. It could be better for the environment. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. I'm taking your word. But when it comes to the pocketbook, it's going to hurt the middle class and the poor, in my opinion. Otherwise, they're probably just going to lease the car, right? Everybody's going to
yeah.
lease it
Well, I mean,
or they'll rent them.
every car has all these electronics now that are, I guess bound to fail at some point, right? But my wife's old car, it was a Honda Pilot. It was not an EV. It was just a normal SUV, big thing. She likes the big car. Like the CarPlay thing never worked. The radio never worked. The heated mirrors never worked. Like they couldn't get it fixed. It was a nightmare. Um, so every car is full of these electronics, the things that are bound to go wrong. I don't, my car doesn't have all that automatic driving nonsense in it. So I don't have all those weird sensors. It's just a car that I hit the pedal and it goes really fast. And that's what I like.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with them, but I hear they're amazing, right? The Tesla cars will beat my Viper for sure. I hear when it
Oh
on
yeah.
a 60 for 0 to 60, it'll smash my Viper. But a Viper just looks cooler. I mean, am I right, ladies? Come on. Anyways, so the reason why I bring up like climate change, the only thing I can really say about it is like, is it really that crazy? Okay. And the reason why I always ask that is because if we, and here's my philosophy is, what if we didn't land on the moon? What if JFK wasn't shot by a lone gunman? What if
Elvis was still
22
alive.
right? So like all of these things that maybe, what if 9/11 when it comes to that, what if somebody, maybe it was an inside job, but what if somebody knew about it before it was going to happen? What if Alex Jones actually said that the Osama bin Laden was going to actually attack it and they were going to blame it on or they were going to blame it on him years before and all of this did happen? Like what if? But what if the climate change problem is not as bad as people say? Well, it's a push for money, it's a push for control. That's the only thing I'm saying. That's why I'm a little bit resistant. Anything
Yeah.
you
And
could
what
say
if,
that
and,
can convince me on that?
and what if we clean up all the air and all the water and make everything livable and healthy for everybody, only to find out that climate change wasn't as big of a problem? What if? Like what an
Yeah.
awful thing that would be to make everything better.
Yeah,
So
I'm with you
yeah.
on that. I'll do it for because it's the right thing, not because government says it's the right thing to do. Is the way I look at it.
Well, I mean, the other way to think about it is if you're talking about control, what is the more likely scenario? That six oil companies that are the most profitable companies on the planet want to keep making money, or that an unregulated cabal of thousands of scientists across the world are all somehow magically on the same page, following the same storylines, looking at the same data from millions of different sensors and reports, and somehow drawing the same conclusion, but it's a conspiracy. Like it doesn't, to me.
No, it does make sense. And here's how I'm going to combat you here. If
Okay,
I wanted to escape off the grid, all right, and go into an area by myself and travel whenever, wherever, with whomever,
sure.
and you could technically shut down the electrical grid. I mean, couldn't you send an EMP? Is that what they're called? And shut down
Electromagnetic pulse.
electrics?
Yeah.
but when it comes to fuel, technically, I mean, back in the day, you said it before, the diesel combustible engine, there was a battle between diesel versus Rockefeller. And then all of a sudden, the guy who created the diesel engine, he fell overboard and he died. So
Yeah,
like,
but if there was an EMP, your car wouldn't start. Your internal combustion engine car wouldn't start because the alternator would be fried. So the gas would still be sitting there, and you could still burn it for warmth, I guess, but the engine would not start because it's everything's
ooh,
electronic now. And by the way,
yeah,
the street signs wouldn't work. The sewer systems wouldn't work. The grid, of course, wouldn't work. Um, but the boilers that are gas powered also wouldn't work because they're all regulated by electronics. So the weak link isn't going, committing more to EVs. The weak link has been, let's not have an EMP over a city ever, and then kind of solves the problem. That's kind of the easier thing to do, right? Uh,
uh,
but but yeah, everything's somewhat vulnerable at some point. But if you want to be off grid, by the way, I mean, back in the 80s, I did off-grid houses, and it's solar panels on the roof, battery bank in the closet, no connection to the utility grid at all, cleans its own wastewater, a fully off-grid house. You can do that. I'll design
that's
it,
the dream.
I'll
I think
design
that's
it
the
for you.
dream for most people that I speak to. So
Oh, really?
yeah, off the
Easy.
grid. EV. I mean,
Totally.
I'm with you.
Grow your own,
Do the solar powered.
grow your own food, generate your own power, process your own waste, all in a all, you need, honestly, for a family of four, you need 5 acres will do it, which isn't big. 5 acres, you can visualize 5 acres. Totally, you could do it.
Man, okay, so I'm gonna look into that because I'm trying to set up my compound somewhere pretty soon here because
Yeah.
who knows what's gonna happen the next 10 years. But last question I have for you, this just because you're a fun guy to talk to about this type of stuff, but the pyramids, how the hell were they created? Who created them? Were they aliens? Did they actually make it the way they say they made them? What are your thoughts? You're an architect. You probably know this stuff. Help me out.
Well, the stones, yeah. So it's pretty interesting because the stones came from really far away.
Yes.
Clearly, they were transported down the Nile. I've been to the pyramids. I climbed one. That's another story. And then what most people don't know is that the they originally were clad in this very finished, dressed um, limestone, and they were white and
Wow.
smooth and glowing, and they were like apparently a sight to behold because they would just, the sun would hit them, they would glow this beautiful gleaming white, and um, and of course the limestone got stripped away over the years, and what was left is the pile of rubble that you see now. But yeah, they're still majorly impressive, and there's theories on how they did it. Um, they'd lay the rock on a bag of sand, they'd pull the plug, the sand would fall, and the rocks would fall together. Like there's all those theories, but it's pretty complex engineering. And then as a nice little tidbit, they dug a moat around the base of the pyramid, which is where it's the widest. They filled it with water, and they used that to level the base. And even though it's 7,000 years later, the pyramids are still like 0.001 degree off of level. They're still like virtually perfectly level. So I'd love to have the Egyptians build me a deck, is all I'm saying, because they're really, really, really good at keeping things level.
Yeah. So what they say is that we've lost the technology to be able to do that. It's just so crazy to me that do you think they could make that today?
No, because we don't have, I mean, if you want to throw human misery and suffering and slavery at it, yeah, I'm sure you could, but we couldn't do it today just without murdering people. I mean, you would just who knows how many people died just building the pyramids, right? There's no way of telling that, but it's a massive undertaking. Same thing with the, Great Wall of China, like all the ancient wonders of the world. Um, all were just throwing human death toll and suffering at it. So yeah, if you wanted to do that, I'm sure you could get it done. But by today's standards, no. We have unions and um, you know, 8 hour work shifts, and like it wouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen today. Like the pyramids are, if you think about it, it's really just a monument to one guy's ego.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, the amount of time and energy, resources, and I don't know. I just, the more I look into it, I'm just blown away by it. And as an architect, I'm sure you're just blown away by it even more than me. So it's just fascinating. Guys, check out his book. And since you're a fun guy, last question, yes or no? Did we land on the moon in 1969?
Yes, of
All
course.
right, good deal. All right, I just want to hear your thoughts. All right, you just lost all credibility. No, I'm kidding. I'm
Oh yeah.
kidding. Anyways, Guys, check out his books. Fun guy, obviously. And if you're in this world and I mean, many people who listen to this have events and they're in the $1 million circle. Obviously, he has a personality. If you want somebody to speak about construction, maybe sustainability, building that business of yours, get in touch with Eric Corey Reed. He wrote or Eric Corey Freed, sorry. His book, Circular Economy for Dummies. He has 11 other ones, I guess. So he has
Yep.
12 total now. Easy to find, easy to pick up on LinkedIn. And if you Google him, you can't miss him. So Eric Corey Freed, is there a website or anything else that you recommend for people to find you on?
Uh, Gosh, I think if you go to ericcoreyfree.com, that'll redirect you everywhere. That'll get you to all the books. And then the firm website is canondesign.com.
Canon Design. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you could find him on Organic Architect. That's your moniker. It sounds like Organic
Yeah.
Architect on LinkedIn. That's awesome, dude. Anyways, guys, check him out. Good guy. And Eric, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life.